Ken, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you all for being here.
Actually, that was probably an unintentional segue of just saying LGBT. You will hear LGBT, you will hear GLBT. You will never hear the T first. You will never hear the T first. That is the way. It's a farce to keep saying the LGBT community, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community. It's great, and it is a community, and it is a community because we're all discriminated against for the same reason. But I challenge you to ever find a locale where the T is put first. Usually when we're talking about the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community, we're talking about, often we're just talking about gay men. We sometimes factor in lesbians. Every now and then we throw people who identify as bisexual in. And in very rare situations do we talk about individuals who identify as T, two-spirited trans. That is the reality of the landscape. And I was looking through some of the, actually I think what you didn't see on the gravestone because it was covered up is that, and I'm not sure if you all read this, Fred's murder was 10 years ago today. Today. So it is quite amazing that this, I was telling Danny before, I was in Charleston, South Carolina yesterday, and it was being screened there. It's being screened all over the U.S. So this is a really good thing, and we should not for a second forget that we are extraordinarily spoiled and privileged, that we are in a community right now that would screen a movie like this. And we must acknowledge that this is not, movie screenings like this are not the reality. I'm not even talking about for half the country, for the vast majority of this country. So I think that we should be empowered by how privileged and spoiled we are, truly, in a good way, but know that this is not, most vast majority of Americans do not have this opportunity to see a movie like this. And so with this being screened all over the country, it's been getting a nice share of press. And what we are again realizing is that the national media does not have the correct terminology to even talk about a movie like this. And I show you one of the big stories that was out there, and a lot of them have the same headline, A Boy Remembered. Did you watch the movie? Because that actually is the antithesis of everything the movie was about. And it's A Boy Remembered. And this is, you can find dozens of articles that it's A Boy Remembered. I am even more, I'm even more spoiled than the rest of you because I have this show that allows me the opportunity, it's a dream every week, to talk to some of the most notable names in LGBT culture. And I try every week, we do news stories and try to have a guest on every week. I try desperately to make a point every week of having some sort of story about trans issues. I cannot tell you how I fail 8 out of 10 weeks. It is so difficult. And when there is a story about the T, it's invariably about bathrooms. Because that is the way we're able to talk about T. And I will tell you, I'll give you some little recent events, and then I do want to turn it over to everyone else. Our neighbors in Connecticut just added protections for gender identity or its expression to a lot of their housing laws. And this was just last week, 2 weeks ago, and it was fought vociferously against by, it just happened to be, I'm not making a political statement because I don't do that. I do that. It was fought vociferously against by a Republican contingent who said, if you pass these housing protections for gender identity or its expression, you are allowing sex offenders to get into female bathrooms. 2 weeks ago. This is our current landscape. This is how we are able to, and it is we are a culture. We can't just disown people, much as I try every Wednesday night for my show. This is where we are talking about the T. One of the best parts about my show is that I'm pointing to this. But you remember what was there? We watched a movie. I have had Kathy Renna on the show 3 times. Kathy Renna was the striped shirt lesbian from New York. And I don't even need advocate.com or 365gay.com. I just need Kathy, to get my LGBT news, I just need Kathy's Facebook page, which is the most up-to-date everything going on in the gay community on her Facebook page. And I cheat and I say that I do research, but I just go to Kathy Rena's Facebook page. And it's an honor to have her on. I love having her on the show because she knows she has her finger on the pulse. And she's a pistol. And she wrote this blog just the other day. And I just wanted to read you a little bit about it, just because this was being screened everywhere. This June 16th, 2011, I will mark, this June 16th, 2011 will mark 10 years since the brutal murder of Fred Martinez at the hands of someone who targeted him simply for being different, for being himself, for being honest and true to his spirit. Attacked seems like an inadequate word. He was bludgeoned to death with a rock, fighting for his life, trying to climb a rock wall over which he could see the trailer park he called home. Soon after we viewed the murder site, we met with Paula Mitchell, Fred's mother, who was reeling from the death of her son and frustrated by the media attention and disrespect of the police and district attorney's office. Her initial questions were simple. Why are you here? Why do you even care? But as it became clear to her that we were there to help her in whatever way she wanted or felt was appropriate, we became a tight-knit group. We made damn sure, is my favorite line, we made damn sure she was surrounded by other parents with similar experiences, like Carolyn Wagner, Judy Shepard, who is just an absolute hero of mine. That's me, Ken, not maybe Kathy Rena. Gabby Clayton and others. Local and outside activists worked together to work with local media and trying to get more attention in the LGBT community and in the media for this crime. Neither an easy feat. My prayer is that millions watch this film and begin to think differently about the people around them, whether they are gay, lesbian, bisexual, straight, or transgender. This film is Fred's legacy and gift to the world, and it is thrilling that PBS's independent lens has chosen to give it the platform and audience it deserves and needs to have the impact it was destined to have in the larger culture. Thank you, Fred, for giving us this gift with your life and death. Good will come from this. Pain and grief and horror will be transformed to hope and love and change. For this, we should all be grateful to Fred, his mother Paula, for sharing her story, and to all the Two-Spirit people who shared their stories in this film. That bit about getting attention in the LGBT media, so this was 2001, only a few years after Matthew Shepard was murdered, where you did not have to work that hard to get this young, white, gay male's murder covered in the media. In some markets, you had to fight. This, for Fred's murder, they had to work just quadruple as hard. I'm just assigning a number. Quadruple as hard to have this murder covered in the media. And it just shows that all hate crimes are not created equal. It really does depend on the victim. So I'm done talking. I would love to hear your thoughts and give as many people time to talk as possible. I will say that, you know, one of the questions that has been asked at all of these screenings, and the one that was asked at the Charleston screening, and you don't have to go there at all, but I want you to leave thinking, is we are in a specific community right now, and it's not the community we saw depicted, but we have to question what this local community does, how much energy we spend on educating around issues of individuals who identify transgender, and the question I'm just avoiding asking, could this happen here?
You were talking about in Connecticut, the bill that just passed in Connecticut. Right now in Massachusetts, the same thing is going on. The Gender Identity Non-Discrimination Act is in front of the legislators down there, and they've been fighting tooth and nail. And it is commonly referred to in the media and everywhere else as the bathroom bill.
Yeah.
And it sucks that that's what people focus on. The people, the negative people focus on this ridiculous notion that if you let transgender people in the correct bathroom, I mean, I'm transgender, and would they rather me use the men's room? I mean, it's ridiculous. And so it's ridiculous. And the notion that just because you open the bathrooms to a transgender person using the bathroom they identify with, that suddenly you're going to have all these sexual predators going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
If there's a sexual predator out there that's going to go in a bathroom, they're going to go in there regardless.
Right.
They aren't going to get dressed up as a woman to go in just so they can go in the ladies' room.
The thing that just the most well-known fact that nobody ever says about LGBT legislation. The quickest way for a politician to pass a piece of LGBT legislation is to drop the T. That is across the board, and that goes for gay legislators as well. Barney Frank does it over and over again. Drop the T. We will get this passed, and I promise you, we will come back and add the T. And let me say one other thing, because this is just a little pet peeve of mine. You want to correct anyone who says, oh, that individual is transgendered. I am not gayed. Someone else is not lesbianed. It is an individual who identifies as transgender, a transgender individual, but no one is transgendered. It's not something that I was crossing the street and I got transgendered. It doesn't, it's not an active word like that. Were you going to say something?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to remark on you're talking about what gets publicized and what doesn't. We lived in Boulder, Colorado at the time of Matthew Shepard's murder, and as well as this one. And we were talking about Matthew Shepard. I mean, there was a ceremony in our town. We were 900 miles away. And, all these things went on in the town, and there was huge media coverage, of course, nationwide. And even a play written about it, which then went nationwide. But we heard nothing in our local media, in our own state, about this at all.
Yeah, and Matthew Shepard was a pivotal. Matthew Shepard, and some of you, I've told it many times. Matthew Shepard is, and pronouns or verb tenses are so horrible. And I was just going to say is and was, but is exactly my age. And that murder was a pivotal moment for me, only because I heard about it. Couldn't have been a pivotal moment for me if I hadn't heard about it. So, for so many, and pivotal in a very positive way, it was very difficult. For how many individuals who identify as trans, who identify as Native American, could this have been a pivotal moment for them, to set them on the path, to have their gay radio show on a local access station, but they didn't hear about it. So, yeah.
I grew up in rural upstate New York, like a lot more conservative, or so they describe themselves, more Republican, self-identified. And I don't think he would have gotten in trouble in school for saying nigger or queer from over there. But now I live over here, and luckily none of it really stuck with me. Most people who come to the door are of any number of sexual identifications. It's a mixed bag. But does the transgender thing, is it a necessary word? You were saying it's easier to pass legislation without it. But is it a self-imposed restriction or weight? I mean, do you need to call yourself transgender, or would there be more benefits to just say, I am who I am? Yeah, today I'm a man. Today
Yeah.
is there a loophole where the
Yes.
transgender?
I'm sorry?
I'm a little bit annoyed that a gay man is talking for transgender people.
I'm not gay.
Transgender.
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Truthfully, I'm sorry, but I have a problem with that.
I agree.
Well, when you asked to do this, did you say go find someone who's transgender?
Danny?
Okay.
So I take responsibility. You can direct your annoyance at me, and I respect and appreciate what you're saying.
Did you look for someone?
The dearth of people who are willing to stand up, in any community, and I think this is where we can perpetuate the farce that Brattleboro is the most accepting community. It's very difficult.
What I explained to Ken is that we looked to the extent that we have the capacity and scrambling at the last second to find a speaker for a film with, any number of other things going on, and not being very plugged into this community. That to the extent that we kind of tried to make an effort to look and knew where to look, we made that effort. It didn't yield a transgender person to be the speaker tonight, and then we went back to Ken and said, "But you at least have some connection with this community and knowledge, and you're a good discussion facilitator. Would you please do this anyway?" So I'm not making excuses. I don't mean to. I don't mean to be making excuses. I register your criticism, and I think it's valid.
I think that kind of
respect it.
compounds my question. Like, I'm not gay or
Can we
transgender, or
clarify
whatever.
transgender
Is that
please?
such a significant category that it needs to divide?
Do you need to identify as gay or lesbian? Yes,
I
you do.
no, that's not what
I mean-
I'm saying. The transgender. I mean, there's a lot of people the other day that come, or every day that come through my door. I don't know necessarily what kind of package they pack. Some do, some don't. Some are transgender, some are gay. I don't. It's all up to them how they identify
Go
themselves.
ahead.
It really doesn't affect me.
Go ahead.
Well, see, it's the way society identifies us. They look at us as different, so we need, unfortunately, to label ourselves for the convenience of those that would put us down.
So just to, like,
For the purpose of
Well,
legislation.
let's get some other
Is it-
voices on the table too. Yeah.
is there more personal significance to where it just can't? Is that
The laws are not set up currently. The laws are not currently set up to protect individuals across the board. And so, yes, in many situations, it is extraordinarily important for someone to identify as trans. Go ahead, yeah.
I would actually now at this point a few things I'd like to say.
Go for it.
Originally, I was going to say about the having to do with the legislation. One example I can give is New York State. About 20 years ago, they were working on a rights protection bill for all LGBT folks. Now, 20 years ago, they decided to drop the T because at this point, I'd say it's quite cliche, and it is, oh, well, it would pass easier without trans protections. Don't worry, we'll come back for you. Well, it's been 20 years, and I'm still waiting, so
Yeah.
that is ineffective, and I really wish more, I guess, what I call mainstream, maybe, mostly gay and lesbian. I have yet to hear any bisexual politicians hold that opinion. Good example is Barney Frank. I really wish they'd stop doing that. About your question having to do with identifying as transgender, it's very important in terms of identity of who we are, and also legal speak. Believe it or not, legal speak, they can get very picky, So a lot of times you need to have the wording for transgender people, because even though the T is included in what we call at this point, the alphabet soup, the protections and the issues surrounding transgender people is vastly different than most gay, lesbians, and bisexuals. One issue is rights. Like, for example, right now in this state of Massachusetts, rights protect gay, lesbian, bisexual people, but right now I could get legally fired, and there's nothing I could do about it in the state of Massachusetts. It also, I know it's a big cliche, the whole bathroom bill thing. Believe it or not, those protections are very important, because I tell you, right now in the state of New Hampshire, you have to have surgery to change your ID. So right now, I have an F on my driver's license. I'm willing to admit that to y'all. Now, for the most part, that doesn't happen. But, if I was to go to a bar, once in a while I like a beer. So if I was to go to a bar and swoop out my driver's license, and here I see the F, they see that, and I've actually had a bartender tell me I needed to use the women's restroom. Now, I don't know how y'all perceive me now, but there's a good chance a lot of the women would be upset if they saw me in the women's restroom. The way I'm presenting quite male, I think. And that's why it's very important that transgender protections is specifically worded in legislation. So, now, if I was to go to the same bar, this actually did happen to me. If I was to go back to that same bar and say, hey, look, you can't do that, I could sue them or make a complaint. See, right now, except for the towns of Boston, Northampton, Amherst, and Cambridge in Massachusetts. Any bar can legally do that. So that answers the legislation piece. Now I'll wrap this up soon. Personally, you know, I'm a man, you know, but I'm a transgender man as opposed to a cisgender man, and that describes the kind of man I am. And right now, transgender men and transgender women are second-class citizens. In my opinion, third-class citizens right now in our culture. And to just say, to tell us to do away with that identity, you know, it really like in a way it would sell myself short, because right now, like for example, my father is a cisgender man. Legally no one can hassle him, like no one can force him to use the women's restroom, and no one can fire him on the basis that he's a man because he's a cisgender man. So that's why that's also very important.
Thank you.
I hope that answers.
And I don't want to lose this piece here, because I don't think that question is being asked at all the screenings across the country. Just as I'm questioning how much we all sat here and looked at Kathy Renna and said, why is a white Jewish lesbian from New York City flying to make the difference that we would hope that someone who identifies as trans could make that difference?
Or Native American.
Or Native American.
That's the other.
That's not a
It's the same
coincidence.
thing in this conversation.
Yeah, but it's,
I respect the issue that you raised, but I also think at the same time that you're, in a way, you're furthering the problem. Because why shouldn't any human being be able to represent and aid and speak for any other human being? Why? So in this, does it need to be a Native American? It needs to not only be a trans, but it needs to be a Native American. Does it need to be a Native American woman from that town? How about from that part of town? Does it need to be someone from that particular neighborhood? I mean, where do you stop drawing the divisions? I mean, you've decided that a relevant distinction for the person who would properly represent that woman is Native American, or represent, come in and help in that situation, is trans and Native American.
Can I respond to that? Would you stand up here and talk to us about the African American experience?
well,
Would you do that?
wait a second.
Would you stand up here and talk about the female
Let me bring it
women's
back.
experience?
I wouldn't, but there are other things I would talk
I
about
would.
that I don't
You would?
represent.
I teach race and education at Marlborough College. I stand on my own merits here. I would never have agreed to do this if I had not dedicated my career to adding gender identity or its expression to every college at which I've worked. Now, I wouldn't have to do that if someone had already done it. So I'll take all the heat. I'm fine with it because I stand on my merits, and this is something to which I have dedicated my own career. So yes, I'm a gay male. I am not Native American. I do not identify as trans. But I would hope at least that we walk out of here and not think, well, the only people who can make a difference are those who identify as trans, who identify as Native American, because I think that's how we walk out of here and say, this is not our problem. And we have to walk out of here and say, we are going to talk about the T, and not just me as the G talk about the other Gs and occasionally invite an L to a potluck.
That's not what I'm saying at all.
So it would have been a different conversation, and I wouldn't represent that. But I will say, in my own defense, this is an issue to which this is a community to which I've devoted my career. We have to walk out of here and see what it is that we can put forward.
And yet you couldn't give him a phone number of a transgender person or a Native American person to do this conversation.
You know, I had
Who's to say that the transgender person whose number he might have given me, or a Native American person, would do a better job than he is doing at facilitating this discussion? You said that he's on the
I want to get some more voices.
That would be great.
Well, first-
It's like this way, let's move on.
Yes.
Can I respond to that as a
Absolutely.
transgender person?
Please.
I appreciate what you're saying. My initial thought was also, why is there not a transgender person presenting the discussion? But at the same time, I appreciate the ally that we have in you, especially as a voice, as a radio voice. I mean, God knows we need as many allies as we can get at this point in this battle that we're fighting for equal protections and everything else. So I'm not going to put him down. He was willing to stand up there and speak for me, speak for whoever. Yeah, like I said, my first thought was the same thing. Why is there not a transgender person doing this? But at the same time, he obviously has the background and the knowledge of the community and I appreciate that. And I'm not offended by it as a transgender.
I want to speak to why, and theoretically I'm facilitating, but that went away a while ago, why this conversation has gone on. And this is why I want to bring us back to the fact that I love that we live in a community where this conversation can happen. Because how many places across the country someone is not going to sit in the audience and say, why couldn't we get someone who's trans? First, because it wouldn't even occur to people in the audience. And second, because there are no out trans people in the community because it's frankly not safe for them. So I will put my little rainbow happy, not rainbow gay, spin on this and say, we are extraordinarily lucky and spoiled that we live in a community where someone in the audience can say, why isn't there someone trans up there? Because there are any number of reasons why that question wouldn't even be asked after such a screening. So it's a good thing. That's why. Good. You had your hand up for a while.
Well, I wanted to come back to this question of why is trans important.
Please.
I'm a trans man. I have male on my driver's license. I'm legally male. But I have female genitalia that require doctor's care from time to time. My insurance company won't pay for it.
Wow.
Because I'm legally male. The medical community, most of them don't know what to do with me when I'm walking in. Honest to be, you know? And we live in a society where you have to choose one of two, male or female. There is no halfway. There is no other. There is no T. They don't have a box for that. So
That was kind
even with my insurance, which is supposed to be some really understanding insurance, okay? 6 months later, a procedure I had 6 months ago has not been paid for. And the only reason is because there's M on my legal status, and I asked for an F service.
Has there ever been a legitimate attempt to add a T box?
Yeah.
No, because that's
In
not
legislatively?
No, it's not a government. It's not a government recognized letter. And I urge people to go to the National Center of Transgender Equality's website, which I can only assume is transequality.org, and now I can't remember off the top of my head, because their report that they just came out with about the very specific medical issues to the trans community, all around how healthcare providers just have no training. Unless you're one of them and you have training and you're great. But for the most part, how healthcare providers do not have training for trans patients, and how trans patients just in droves stay away from seeking healthcare because they know that training is not there. And it leads to disproportionately higher medical issues for the trans community. It is a staggering report.
I just wanted to add to that, because I'm also a trans woman. I'm fortunate to have transitioned here in southern Vermont, which has just been, it's been such a non-issue and a non-event living here that it's really been a cakewalk compared to some of my friends elsewhere in the country. But as far as the medical care goes, you know, I have a very caring, very understanding GP, but throughout my process, you know, I've had to educate her and, you know, tell her, you know, you need to go look at this. And she is, unlike a lot of medical professionals, she is willing to go out and do all the extra legwork on her time, on her dime, to get up to speed so that she could give me the best possible care. You know, and I too I have an employer with incredible health insurance. But you know, trans healthcare was specifically excluded when I started there. And it is no longer. It is no longer. They went through all of their necessary hoops to remove those restrictions. But it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy because my driver's license still has an M on it. It will have an F soon, but it still has an M on it. And so therefore, you know, things like employment records, they send your social security number in, and despite the fact that I have a legal name change, with all of that filed,
the M will come up as part of the Social Security match check. So I am instantly outed to whoever I give my Social Security number to if they have any reason to go research it. And that immediately gives them a reason to discriminate against me. And there are a myriad of ways that transgender people have to go through doing the normal things in society where there are opportunities for us to be denied. A multitude of things that you just take for granted. Things that I took for granted when I was living as a man, I don't take for granted anymore. Because sometimes I have to fight for them. And I shouldn't have to.
Thank you. I guess, because I think are we towards the end of our time? But we don't have to be on. Keep going with this all night. But
I have a question.
yeah.
Is there any kind of concerted effort toward unisex bathrooms in public spaces, or like bathrooms that are not men's rooms and women's rooms, but like the bathrooms we have here, anybody can go in either bathroom? I know the bathrooms
and stuff have done that. UVM has done that.
Yep.
A lot of the colleges and stuff have done that, going to unisex bathrooms. But it's claimed to be a big process to make them accommodating for both genders.
Colleges, I mean, obviously this is my world, but colleges are unbelievable litmus tests for trying things out, and transgenderlaw.org is really the big hub of what colleges are trying what things. I just got an email this morning from the intramural director of intramural sports at UVM, because they don't know what to do. Or at a Northern Vermont school. Sorry. At a Northern Vermont state large school. Because they don't know what to do.
About bathrooms?
No, about a female to male student wanting to play on a male sports team. They are, this email, that, by the way, that is the entirety of the issue. I cannot tell you how long this email was. And I had to just boil it down to the one sentence of, we're freaking out, we don't know what to do. So adding gender identity or its expression is a huge deal. Where, I'm pointing to Catherine because we work together, this is the time of year when incoming first-year students are looking for their housing. Housing trans students at a college campus, huge deal, and no one has figured it out. The colleges who say they figured it out means that they put them in singles. Singles on college campuses are what we traditionally give to students who have problems who can't live with other students. So the fact that this is what we give to trans students, I think, as a student affairs person, is extraordinarily problematic. At the same time, putting a trans student in a room where their safety is compromised, that would also be the antithesis of the student affairs experience. No school has figured this out with housing. They say they have, or they say, we'll put them on a gender-neutral floor. First of all, there's no such thing as gender neutral. Second of all, how is that going to work? What are the bathroom facilities? Are there communal showers? What are we doing? But colleges, I mean, obviously colleges are where I work. This is what I do. It gets really intense. And when occasionally there is a presentation at a conference around trans issues, packed. Because and it's usually packed, and it's a lot of people in the room saying, I don't know what to do either.
I just wanted to say something in regards to the unisex restrooms. I have actually somewhat of a dissenting opinion, and hear me out why. I think in the long run, having all bathrooms for everyone unisex will just actually, in a libertarian financial sense, save the buildings a lot of money because they only have to build one bathroom. So they'll actually save businesses money, and if we're talking about a political economic sense. Part of my dissenting opinion is, for the long term, as of now, if we have a bathroom that's men, women, and unisex, and we expect all trans people to use the unisex bathroom, for some trans people that might be cool, but for others, especially those of us who identify more as binary and stealth, that's like a big slap in the face. That's like, it's forcing us into another box, how we don't identify. And there are some trans people out there who, maybe according to what I call cis sexist standards don't blend in or pass. I hate the word pass. It's very cis sexist. And passing is what, but while I think it's a great alternative for those who identify a certain way, who love a unisex bathroom, for me personally, if someone was to tell me, okay, Andy, you're trans, you have to use the unisex bathroom, that would, like, for me, be a big slap in the face. Because I have every right to use the men's bathroom as much as the cis man. I mean, that's how I take it as personally. But hey, I think if other people want to use the unisex bathroom, I think it's a good option for others, but don't expect all trans people to want to use that option, to be happy with it.
Yeah, and I think it's also looking at bathrooms in different facilities and saying, okay, so this is labeled male and female for a single-use bathroom. Why? It's not maybe creating a third one, which some places have done, but why? What are we gaining by that single-use bathroom that are identical? What are we, by distinguishing those, what are we accomplishing?
The fact of the matter is that we're all in there for the same freaking purpose. I'm in there to go to the bathroom. I'm not in there to gawk. I'm not in there to assault anybody. I mean, people make such a big deal about it. I go into the bathroom. I do the same thing that anybody else does in the bathroom. And why does there need to be this big problem? Whether you are Andy going in the ladies' room or me going in the men's room, I'm just in here to go to the bathroom. That's all there is to it. And it gets so overblown, and it just becomes such a ridiculous issue. And unfortunately, there's too many people out there to focus on that dwell on
Giving you the last word.
Okay, I've tried to do my part, and I feel like it's really small, but I end up using whichever bathroom in a moment, and I notice how upset some people get. I mean, really, it's something like chasing after me. And so I just comment, I just say a bathroom is a bathroom and a human's a human. And I just leave it there. I don't know how others would feel about that, but it's just a small part in trying to, I'm not going to say erase gender, but then again,
Bust the binary.
Bust the binary.
If it's
create
not
dialogue.
really a legitimate issue for anyone in this room, then where does the issue get presented? Is it another catchword that politicians like to throw out there just to get things, just to stir the pot and talk about something other than real politics?
Generally, it's a very conservative, religious people.
I know.
Not to stereotype, but
Well,
generally, that's what it boils
That's
down
what
to.
I'm
It's
saying.
people
I mean,
that are super conservative, that think we're a bunch of freaks, and that we're just out to molest their children in the bathrooms.
That's goes back to my transgender classification. Is it something that you're allowing to be put on you? Is it?
No.
It's who we are.
I've
It's who
been
we
in a
are.
boys' bathroom my whole life, many times in Charles. I could probably count in milliseconds the amount of time I've seen actually looking at someone else's unit. It doesn't happen.
I identify as female, but the fact of the matter is that I'm a transgender female, and I can't change that. That's who I am. It's part of my being, and that's a fact of life. So
Same here. Yeah. If
It's
somehow,
not a period of time.
can I just
one or
say-
the other. You're not a female,
I have transitioned. Yes,
so you're a female.
I am female.
Gay, lesbian, straight, whatever.
But it also
You look
is
like a
part
female
of
to me. That's good enough for me. I mean,
but it also is part of who I am. It's part of my makeup. I was a man. I lived as a man. I'm now female.
if somehow we walk out of here and hear this dialogue and watch this movie, and somehow we're able to walk out of this room and say, we're good. We have all the education that we need. The protections are all there. We're good as a community. I don't think that's possible that anyone could walk out of this room and not say, well, clearly there's more education to be done. And we cannot leave it to a certain sect of the population.
Sorry to introduce, I'm just videotaping, but to introduce myself into this dialogue is fascinating. Because I'm learning things. I guess I identify myself as a heterosexual male. I'm curious of this term cis male. Could you educate me? I'm just curious. I'd like to ask that question just because I'm not familiar with it.
Cisgender, as its term in Latin roots, it actually has its roots in scientific terms, like in biology, like cis meaning the same side on. And for example, a cisgender person is someone, or another term is cissexual. If you read Julia Serrano's Whipping Girl, she coins the term cissexual, and I also think that is a very valuable term, both just like transgender and transsexual, cisgender and cissexual. But basically, cis means on the same side on, and it's a way to level the playing field, just like there's heterosexual and gay, or straight and gay, there's now cisgender and transgender, because in the past there were problematic terms like people would call cis people normal, which is, incredibly problematic and transphobic.
Or biased.
Yeah. So the term, it labels the playing field, and I really like that term. And also, this is also another controversy in the trans community, but the term, for example, people use the term like bioman, for example. And now, personally, that term makes me cringe, because biologically based on what? It's not even sex is black and white. Even sex is on a spectrum. I mean, they've done studies recently on trans people's brains and found that trans women have the brain structure of cis women, and trans men have the brain structure of cis men. So if we're talking about our brains in a biological sense, I'm actually biologically male. So that's
what I was hoping to do is put out a statement as sort of the form of the question, is this idea of a spectrum. You have lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. So from my learning experience would be, the idea is, it's a two-part thing. The genitalia that you were given at birth, so to speak, doesn't necessarily identify your sexual preference.
Sexual orientation, yeah.
But also, the genitalia that you were, again, I'm using the term given, I don't know a better word, given at birth, born with, doesn't necessarily identify your sexual identity. In terms of gender identity. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, to me, it's just again, from my perspective, for what it's worth, as a person who identifies as heterosexual, gender identity seems so crucial to personal identity, and that therefore you can understand why there's such resistance and we end up talking about bathrooms for longer than we should. But it's so crucial. I remember reading something, it was esoteric, and it said, the first thing you do when you see a person is you identify them as a male or woman. I said, well, that's nonsense. And then the next person I saw, of course, I'm putting them in that box of man or woman.
That identification has been studied by psychologists, and it happens within the first half second that you encounter a person.
Well,
Your brain,
the baby is born.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
it's like the
Oh, it's
baby
a boy.
comes out. This is where we put it.
Yeah.
Right, but the interesting thing is, they immediately categorize the baby based on external genitalia and not on their internal sense or identity. I mean, I knew at the age of 4 that I was a girl. And the arguments with my mother, where she was insisting that I was a boy because of what was between my legs, left a pretty good mark. You can't. The problem is that we so enforce this binary that it's got to be black or white, one or the other. That those of us who say no, I belong over there, and challenge that, scare people.
Yeah. Well, I think in the movie they were talking about different cultures and where that the operation wouldn't be necessary because you would fall into place in that culture.
Yeah. There are cultures in Asia that are like that.
Right.
In the Philippines and
Bali.
In Bali, they have room in their society for people, up to 7 genders in some of the Asian cultures.
And we probably should, at our close, tie it back to the movie, because we did watch a movie, and do very pointedly acknowledge that transgender and two-spirited are not the same thing.
No.
They are not the same thing. Those are not synonyms. And so when, going back to the question, talking about transgender, while I appreciate you identifying as a straight male, I can find you in 2 seconds, maybe in the room, any number of gay men, any number of lesbians who would argue incorrectly that gender identity codes to sexual orientation. That the T is with GLB because it absolutely has to do with who you choose to love. When it's A, not a choice, and B, those are two very different things. Two-spirited is a little bit different. And so I think this is where, look, I am at my heart an educator, I'm a professor, this is what I do, and I think that that's where it's important that we do leave and do our research in the difference between sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, different than gender identity. These are different things, and so there are we actually have this really cool thing called the web, where we can go on there and do our research. But if we fail to do that research, then we can't be an ally, and I really appreciate you using that word, because I think that that's what we need to be, is how are we actively an ally, and it is an active process. But the first step in being an ally is actually the education piece. Because you can't be an effective ally if you can't talk about the difference between gender identity and gender expression and sexual orientation. You can't. You can only get about 2 seconds into the conversation, and then you're not gonna look very smart. So you want to go to transgenderlaw. I like giving resources. Transgenderlaw.org and see what colleges are doing. You want to go to the National Center for Transgender Equality. And I really do think it's transequality.org, but just type in National Center for Transgender Equality. The executive director is Mara Kiesling, who does incredible work, who I had on the show. We talked, and she said, I will never forget, the end of the interview, she said, please have me back. And we actually can talk about things other than transgender. And that was good for me. Not in the moment, I felt like an idiot, but afterwards I thought about it and thought, oh my God, how am I perpetuating this? Well, gosh, there's someone transgender on the show. Obviously, we can't talk about anything else. So even on my own little gay local show, I'm boxing people in. So we have to be active allies, and the only way to be an active ally is to educate ourselves. And I do want to very specifically thank people who shared their stories here, and I hope that no one for a second doesn't acknowledge how brave that is and how much that furthers the conversation. Thank you all. Thanks for coming and watching this movie. I'm happy we all had this opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just one more point. I want to think about, you identified yourself as an